Psalm 36. Psalm 36 says these words from verse 5. Your love, O Lord, reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your justice like the great deep. O Lord, you preserve both man and beast. How precious is your unfailing love. Both high and low among men find refuge in the shadow of your wings. To find refuge in God is a wonderful thing, an incredible thing. And I just watched one of these fun videos, which was about situations where dangerous animals were perhaps in an enclosure and people were at risk in different ways. But the thing that protected them, providing they were keeping the right side, of course, was the glass screen or the cage or whatever else, the protection, the barrier. And God is a place where we can find a sense of protection and safety. And the incredible thing is we face so many challenges and dangers and trials and difficult situations. And we're not guaranteed that those won't happen. We're not guaranteed that life will just be plain sailing. But we are told to find a refuge in Him. And we are encouraged to find that refuge in the shadow of His wings. We are encouraged to find a place of safety and sanctuary. And the amazing thing is that whenever we do that, we draw on His resources, we draw on His strength. We find the reality of His unfailing love. And that's a resource that doesn't run out. Whatever the pressures around us, whatever the challenges that we face, His love doesn't run out. It's unfailing. And we see so many sort of strong superlatives, very strong descriptive words in this passage, where the psalmist says, things like, how priceless is your unfailing love. Your justice is like the great deep, your faithfulness to the skies, your righteousness like the mighty mountains. The vast scale of the resources of God, or the character of God, are so hard to measure, so hard to contain. We're wowed, we're awed by the incredible resource of God that He gives, and that's the psalmist is pointing us to. That's what the psalmist is trying to highlight and underline for us again, that these resources, these strengths that God has, these incredible dimensions of God's love and His righteousness, His faithfulness, all the good things that He has for us. They're so big, they're so difficult to measure, they're so wonderful. The psalmist wants us to grasp hold of this fact, and so much of the Psalms, Psalm 36 and some of the other ones just preceding it, are dealing with all sorts of evil plots and people against him, and these other circumstances that he's definitely kind of pouring out his heart to the Lord about, and feeling quite frustrated about. And yet the constant reminder is, I must look to the resources of God in it. I must look to the immeasurable nature of God's character. If I can't see the immeasurable nature of God's character, I'm not going to be able to get proportion on so many things. We need to find that sense of proportion. How big is God compared to this circumstance? How vast is He? How enormous are His resources? Scale matters. The scale of His unfailing love, the scale of His righteousness. I was watching a little video just a bit recently, and it was one of these huge icebergs, and an enormous carving. And carving is where the iceberg, gets to meet the sea and starts to break up. But enormous amounts of ice were falling off the end of this glacier, and it was starting to disintegrate and go into the sea, and it was huge. And of course, forming icebergs that then float away. But the person doing the video said you can't quite imagine, you can't get your head around how vast this is, how huge this these blocks of ice are. Um, I just try to describe it, as basically the sort of size of Lower Manhattan and much taller skyscrapers than the ones that are there. The scale of it was pretty difficult to imagine from just the video. And we're often trying to put words on describing the scale of God's righteousness, His justice, His love, the character of God. We're trying to just find some ways of referring to it. That's what the psalmist is struggling to do. And all his examples, the ocean depths, the height of the mountains, all these other things, they still don't quite describe adequately the character and nature of God. But he's just using them as a bit of an illustration to try and get our head around these things, if we can possibly do that. And so I want to pray that we would be renewed in our understanding and revelation of God's righteousness, His justice, His love, His incredible resources, despite whatever challenges that Paul talks about, the height and depth and length and breadth of God, the love of God. I pray for that revelation of God's love, that revelation of His unfailing love, that revelation of His justice and righteousness and mercy, revelation of who He is and His character will just come through to us afresh. We may not be able to actually get our head around it and fully grasp it at all, but I pray that the depth of it, the height of it, the breadth of it will just come through just that little bit more to our hearts, will come through that little bit more into our experience, would begin to impact and crash in our lives with an incredible wave of God's love. May God's love just cause that amazing, overwhelming sense of the wave that it provides for us. The overwhelming sense of this this all-encompassing love, this amazing, extravagant, all-embracing love that comes and washes over us. May that be the case right now for you and for me. May we experience it afresh. May we re-encounter the love of God like never before. Amen.